Good afternoon. My name is Katlyn von Muenster. I am a licensed professional counselor and the clinical support programs manager here at Colorado Ovarian Cancer Alliance, and just want to send the warmest welcome to each survivor, caregiver, loved one, friend or family member, a healthcare professional. I'm so glad that you were able to take some time for yourself to gather some support through this webinar today. My heart and hope for you is that number one, that you feel less alone, and that you feel more supported and or have some ideas in terms of coping skills or language to help you feel more understood with this experience of cancer and the coronavirus. One note that I want to make here at the beginning is that what I'm about to talk about is very individualized. I might talk about some general notions, but everyone's experience is unique to them, just like your cancer diagnosis is unique to you. Our trauma responses, the ways we cope, our coping skills even, the ways we receive support, that's all up to your own needs, and it's all up to how you respond. So that being said, I just want you to know that how you're responding to cancer and how you're responding to COVID, that you're valid, your feelings are valid. That's one of the things we're going to go through today. So today I'm going to go over trauma. What is it? Trauma responses, our emotions. I'm going to go through grief, some coping skills, what's hope like right now. And then at the end of this, we're going to have a share time. I'm going to leave you with some process questions that you're more than welcome to reach out to me at Katlyn at Colo, so that's COLO -ovariancancer.org. Send me some of your thoughts. I would love to touch base to hear about your story. There is a researcher and author that I think has really poignantly stated something that I think that we're all experiencing throughout all of this, and that's vulnerability. And Brene Brown, which we'll have in our resource guide, is going to be the names of the authors, resources that I mentioned throughout today, under the COVID-19 resource tab on the resource guide. But getting back to Brene Brown, I want to read you a quote. This pandemic experience is a massive experiment in collective vulnerability. We can be our worst selves when we're afraid, or our very best, bravest selves. In the context of fear and vulnerability, there's often very little in between, because when we are uncertain and afraid, our default is self-protection. We don't have to be scary when we're scared. Let's choose awkward, brave, and kind, and let's choose each other. COVID, coronavirus pandemic, cancer, both are traumas. That being said, I think the cancer experience and being a survivor, I know that there are going to be people that are newly diagnosed watching this. There are a lot of parallels to how we approach and how we experience both cancer and COVID-19. When you are diagnosed, when that doctor says you have cancer, I have a feeling that the room gets pretty foggy, that it's hard to understand the doctor. What ends up happening is your body shoots adrenaline. You go into what we would say a trauma response or survival mode. I'm also going to guess that your world gets pretty small. You're only focusing on the people in your life that are important and close to you. You're having to rearrange your life, your routine. Your sense of safety or felt sense of safety no longer feels that way. Maybe your body doesn't feel safe. COVID-19 has many parallels. We've had to slow down social distancing, take precautions around germs and cleanliness. There's a heightened sense of fear and not too many places that feel safe right now. There's no real roadmap, is there, with cancer? And the same with COVID-19. It seems like every day there's a new development with high levels of uncertainty. The analogy I like to use when talking about cancer, and now with COVID-19, is that it's like being dropped off in a foreign country. Number one, you didn't know that you were going to be taken to. And number two, you don't have your passport, you don't have your belongings. You're just dropped off, you don't know the language, you don't know the customs, no roadmap. And you're just told, figure it out. Cancer can feel the same. There are a lot of new language or terms that you have to learn. You start to learn the landscape of the hospital, of the staff that you're going to be working with. And now with COVID, it's a whole new landscape. Routines are changed. The ways we interact with each other have changed. And I can guess that if you're in treatment or about to go through surgery, that extra precautions are taken. How we respond to being dropped off in a foreign country is all based upon survival mode. I'd like to take a moment and talk a little bit about a trauma response and using that analogy of being dropped off in a foreign country, okay? Trauma, by its very definition, is it's being exposed to a threat or a perceived threat that could, in essence, wound you. Cancer definitely falls within that category of a traumatic experience. So does the pandemic of COVID-19 or coronavirus. These are unprecedented times, continual first experiences. I have a feeling that you never thought that you would get cancer. We never thought that we would ever go through a pandemic. Just like when you were diagnosed with cancer, I think with COVID-19 right now, it's hard to tell up from down. And that being said, I think COVID-19 as a collective, our nervous system, as all people of this world, our nervous system has just been so panicked, fearful, weary, and concerned. I think collectively we've hit the point of exhaustion. Some trauma responses that are normal. We've been shocked. It feels disorienting. Lots of fear and anxiety, anger, sadness, depression, feeling numb or overwhelmed. Avoidance, trying not to think about either cancer or COVID. Not feeling safe or safe enough, even within your home or around your loved one, whether you're a caregiver or a survivor. Being highly critical of yourself, judging yourself, hypervigilance, difficulty sleeping, overeating, eating high sugar or high carbs in excess. The list could go on, and I want you to know that how you are surviving, how you are getting through, is valid and it's functioning. Okay? Our survival modes are just that. They're to help us survive a threat. There's another author that I like to talk about when talking about stress or trauma, and her name is Dr. Emily Nagoski, and she talks about the stress cycle in particular. So she breaks down the stress cycle into 3 parts. So identifying the stressor, fleeing or the fight, flight, or freeze response, and then regulating or releasing. A good analogy that she gives is she talks about in her book about imagining a deer or an animal that senses a predator or senses a threat. We could say a lion. There's a pursuit by the lion and the deer's able to get away. Okay? So the deer, instead of fighting, flees, runs. That's their trauma response or their stress response. What the deer does once the deer feels safe is they just shake, lay down, take a nap. They run, they move their body. Quite often what happens, I think, within cancer, and now with COVID, because of the level of uncertainty, is that we're not finishing the stress cycle. We're going between identifying the threat and trying and just surviving within our trauma response, or fight, flight, or freeze, and we're not releasing. We're not regulating. And I think part of the reason why we're not always going to that release or regulation place is because we're experiencing a lot of grief right now. There are 2, I would say, foremost leaders in terms of grief work, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler. Name the 5, or David Kessler encourages actually a 6th stage of grief. The 5 stages are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And David argues meaning making. These are part of the framework that makes up our learning to live without the things that we've lost. I think Kessler wrote in a Harvard Business Review article about grief and this particular experience of the coronavirus. I think it's very true of also the cancer experience, but here's a quote from him in his article. Yes, and we're feeling a number of different griefs. We feel the world has changed, and it has. We know this temporary, but it doesn't feel that way, and we realize things will be different. Just as going to the airport is forever different from how it was during 9/11, things will change, and this is the point at which they changed. The loss of normalcy, the fear of economic toll, the loss of connection. This is hitting us, and we're grieving collectively. We are not used to this kind of collective grief in the air. When you were diagnosed with cancer, or when your loved one was diagnosed with cancer, nothing felt normal. I have a feeling that nothing really felt safe. Your schedule, your life was thrown upside down, and you're blindsided. I know with COVID-19, it exasperates all of those feelings. I know that when we start to slow down, whether that's you start to get into the routine of chemotherapy or recovery from surgery or whatever your treatment regimen is, radiation, a new normal starts to develop. That's when we can start to successfully complete the stress cycle. And I think that when we start to go and finish our stress cycle, going into that self-regulation or release period, it's when we start to notice how much has changed and how much we have lost. It's also called ambiguous loss. The loss of normalcy, the loss of routine, the loss of a felt sense of safety. I I want to take a minute and shift gears here, since I've talked about how important it is to be able to find release or to start the process of letting yourself feel from both the pandemic of COVID-19 and cancer. Are a few coping skills that I think can help, both with managing feelings during this time and also to start the process of going through, what did I just experience? One of the first suggestions, or one of the first ideas that I want to talk about, is identifying feelings. Right now, the world is full of a lot of panic, fear. I mean, the cousin of fear is scarcity, anger. These are all really intense, heavy emotions to feel, and it's understandable that you want to cope with them. I am encouraging you to identify your feelings from a place of self-compassion. Truly, what the definition of self-compassion means is being a friend to yourself. Be a friend to yourself. Would you shame somebody that has a cancer diagnosis or is a cancer survivor for having anxiety right now? Don't shame yourself for feeling anxious or for feeling sad or for feeling depressed. The friendlier you treat yourself, the friendlier your world will feel. It's spoken by Pema Chodron. We need to attend to our emotions right now, not stuff them, not tell them that they're wrong or they're bad. Acknowledging can be so helpful. It doesn't mean that the feeling's going to go away. It doesn't mean that the feeling's going to stop. It is going to give you room to let your feelings move through you. Attending to your feelings could look like crying. It could look like texting a friend saying, I'm having a really bad day. Is there any chance that you could talk? It could look like writing or journaling. It could look like going for a walk and talking while you're walking. There are a lot of different ways in which you can express and let yourself feel the feels, as I like to say. Which moves me into my second coping skill here. Self-guided resources can be so helpful. And self-guided resources are guided meditations. There are a lot of different apps out there, such as Calm, Insight Timer, I think Sonovella, and also breathing exercises. I know I had mentioned I'm going to be posting the resources that I talk about during this presentation on the resource guide at Colorado Ovarian Cancer Alliance's website, which is www.colo-ovariancancer.org. Go to the resource guide, and then there's going to be a COVID-19 page where you can select, and we've got some resources specific for this experience. Guided meditations can be helpful. One exercise that can also be helpful is just making a list for the future when you're having a hard time. Write down a list of what helps you get through tougher moments. That could be cooking, that could be going for a walk, that could be talking with a friend, that could be cleaning. I know that there are a lot of people cleaning their homes right now. Really, it's up to you in terms of how you find relief and release from these emotions. The third point I want to talk about is grounding. Grounding and regulating the body. Emotions live in the body. And when I use the word grounding, it's kind of like when you know that you're standing and you feel really sturdy in your body. It's what helps you bring yourself, your mind, your body, your spirit into the present moment. Right now, we are in a season of needing to take care of our bodies out of necessity, which with cancer, that is an entire season of needing to take care of your body and be intentional with your immune system. With COVID-19, it's again just another reminder. And taking care of your body and grounding can look like a lot of different ways. It could be going for a walk once a day, working out, yoga, being mindful of what food you're putting into your body. I know when you're stressed or in a trauma response or anxious, we tend to gravitate towards what I like to call the Buddy the Elf diet. Candy, candy corn, candy cane, and sugar. Be mindful of what's nourishing to your body, what helps you feel good, what's going to build your immune system. That's going to help you feel better. It's also going to help your emotions. The other part of this is sleep. I realize that sleep can become quite dysregulated. Finding ways, whether it's listening to music or there are sleep meditations that you can look into. It's called sleep hygiene, in essence. Everything that you do before you go to bed that's going to help you get a good night's rest. When we're rested, I think we're more able and resourced to be able to handle some of these bigger emotions, such as anxiety, sadness, depression, fear. I've got two more suggestions that I want to talk about. One being, I think, a parallel to both the cancer and COVID-19 experience, and that is monitor how much time you're spending researching both. I'm sure when you were diagnosed, you looked through Google, and Dr. Google can say a lot. And there are a lot of varying opinions out there. The same with COVID-19. I'm not sure if you noticed how you felt when you Googled your cancer or when you've Googled COVID-19, but now is not the time to binge on looking into and researching results on COVID-19 and cancer. What I am encouraging is to find reliable resources. So that could be the CDC, WHO, Colorado government, and find enough information for you to be strategic, okay? And strategic looks different for everybody because everybody's at a different point in their journey with cancer. Which leads me to my last suggestion, which that's problem solving, okay? Problem solving is one way to manage some of these really intense emotions, such as anxiety. Call your doctor before you go in for chemotherapy. Ask if there's a special entrance. Ask if there's anything that you can be doing to mitigate your risk to COVID-19. Problem solving helps the mind have a place to go to rather than focusing on the question of what happens, what's next, essentially really rigid thinking. All that to say, these coping skills that I've talked about, they're not going to necessarily take away the feeling overnight. They're going to help you be able to work through or manage the emotions themselves. Which really leads me to my last point here. I understand that hope is a very risky emotion and belief when you have cancer. And it can be a really helpful and beautiful place to live in when you have cancer, and especially through COVID-19. There's a quote that I want to tell you by Maya Angelou. Hope and fear cannot occupy the same place. Invite one to stay. I realize that hope is an emotion that you just have all the time, right? There's a lot of fear involved with both cancer and COVID. When you are able to have those moments of hope, take a moment, focus on a gratitude, or focus on the one thing that feels positive around you, and give thanks for it. Uncertainty. I know I had just mentioned that. Uncertainty by nature is neutral, okay? That means it could go either way. If you can, my hope is for you is that you can have these small moments where hope can just make a small presence in your life, or a large presence in your life. Because it's going to make all the difference in getting through both cancer and COVID-19. All right, my final thoughts. Going back to the analogy of how I started this, being thrown into a foreign land with language you don't understand, customs. I realize with cancer, you're learning your landscapes. Either one chemotherapy at a time, one appointment at a time. We're doing the same with COVID-19. And it is so important that you be kind to yourself. Not shame yourself. To reach out when you need support. Use some of these coping skills that I talked about today. I'm going to leave you now with a quote by Pema Chodron. We think that the point is to pass the test or overcome the problem. But the truth is that things don't really get solved. They come together and they fall apart. They come together again and fall apart again. It's just like that. The healing comes from letting there be room for all of this to happen. Room for grief, for relief, for misery, and for joy. Some questions to think about and process. How have you been managing the stress from both COVID and cancer? What specifically has helped you stay grounded or centered through both of those experiences? Where do you need to ease up on yourself? That self-compassion, being a friend to yourself. And finally, what good do you hope that comes from this? All right, feel free to reach out to me again. That's Katlyn, Katlyn, at colo-ovariancancer.org with any thoughts, concerns, or feedback. Be well, sending lots of love and light to each of you. Thank you.